Good morning. First of all, I just want to say Bart's just embarrassed by all the love and affection, so I think we should embarrass him some more. That's Bart Lubow. I love this man. He's been there for me. First of all, I will say it is fun to be on CNN arguing with Newt Gingrich every day. I am not persuading him on pretty much anything, except on the topic that we're meeting on today. And what I want to discuss is the fact that those of us who were on the front lines when it was horrible, those of us who were on the front lines when we were doubling the prison population in our country, those of us who were on the front lines when we saw kids being stuffed and double stuffed into cages and both political parties thought it was a great idea. Those of us who were there when it was very, very hard and when it was very, very lonely are now facing potentially a different challenge. What happens when the tide begins to turn our way? Are we prepared to do what needs to be done to actually turn a change in public opinion to a change in the life outcomes for our young people? That's a question. But before I get into that, and before I talk a little bit about my good friend Newt, I want to just tell you a little bit about how a nerdy kid like me from the South wound up fighting prisons in Oakland, California. I'm probably the least likely person to get involved in this stuff for one reason. One reason, and the reason is named Willie Anthony Jones, my father. My dad, Willie Anthony Jones, grew up in abject poverty in Memphis, Tennessee under segregation. He put himself through college by joining the military in the middle of the big conflict, got out of the military, put himself through college, put his little brother through college, put a cousin through college, put me through college and my sister through college. He was the original bootstrapper. So I don't want to hear anybody from the other political party talking to me about the need for people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. My dad made the boots and did that. So, and a lot of us got family members that did that. So, but there was a downside for me of having a father who was a former cop in the military who became an educator, which was that to this day, and I'm 45 years old, I've never had a beer. I've never touched a cigarette of any kind. My dad's dead and gone. I'm still scared he's gonna come and get me. So when you grow up in that kind of environment, I think they call it sheltered. We called it shell-shocked. You don't get in any trouble. And my dad then shipped me off to Yale Law School, probably the proudest day of his life. And I got there, and I was completely ill-prepared for what I discovered. When I arrived at the campus, I quickly discovered that about 85 to 90% of the campus was what you and I would call nonviolent drug offenders. Now this was incredibly distressing to me. And I was afraid to call my father. I was afraid he would come up there and paddle everybody, spank everybody. So instead I called my grandmother. Now we have enough African Americans in the audience to know I did not call her grandmother. I called her Big Mama. You got your little mama, and her mama is the Big Mama. So I called Big Mama, and I said, Big Mama, they're up here smoking marijuana cigarettes. She said, baby, just pray for the souls. I said, Big Mama, I've been praying and they're still doing it. And she said, oh, baby, we'll tell your professors about it. I said, they're doing it too, we're doing it too. Oh, God, help us all. So this was just a shock for a Christian Southern boy. I grew up in hot, sweaty churches. So to get away from all this horrific debauchery on this campus, I decided to go and volunteer in the community, where I quickly discovered that they also were smoking marijuana cigarettes. But I noticed something else. The kids on the campus, same age group, 18, 19, 20, doing the same drugs, within literally eyesight of each other. Anybody ever been to New Haven, Connecticut? You know, from the campus, you can see the hood. The kids that got in trouble doing drugs at Yale didn't go to prison, they went to rehab. Those kids got help. Those kids went on to become doctors, lawyers, in the case of George W. Bush, President of the United States. Everybody knows that. We saw police cars with the lights on going past Skull and Bones, where hard drugs were being done, to go 3 or 4 blocks away and stop outside housing projects, and kids I was volunteering with were getting pulled out in their underwear. Those kids didn't get rehab. They got 16, 17, 18, 24 years. Now that was shocking to me. And I'll never forget going to talk to the dean of the law school about it. And what he said turned my life around, and I've still never gotten over it. I said, how can we be in this building, #1 law school in the world and all this, studying about all this stuff, and you can't walk out the front door and see equal justice anywhere? Out the front door. He said, well, Mr. Jones, those kids you're talking about in the New Haven community, those kids are drug pushers, man. Our kids are experimenting with drugs. And I said, well, sir, I can find no such exception in our law or in our Constitution. And I went to the left side of Pluto. And I turned out a bunch of fancy jobs, and I moved to the Bay Area, and I started trying to do something about this massive injustice, this cancer on the country, mass incarceration, racist mass incarceration system that at the time was really just getting momentum in the early 90s. And we did everything we could to fight against it, and culminated in the fight that Bart was talking about, where it finally got to the point where in Alameda County, they had decided that there was so much federal money and state money sloshing around to hurt kids, they were gonna just grab all of it and build this massive super jail for kids. It would have been the biggest per capita juvenile hall in the country. It would have been bigger than the juvenile hall in Chicago, Cook County, for little bitty Oakland. And we literally, I mean, it was 1968, man. We marched, we protested, we sat in, we sang in, we rapped in, and we also discovered something very, very important, which is gonna inform the rest of my comments. This proposal had already snuck past the community, and it was funded, and it was gonna happen. They were gonna build this super jail. And we didn't think we had a chance to stop it, but we just couldn't lay down for it. And we started protesting and raising our voices and talking about the injustice, and we brought in Bart, and we had all these studies, and we produced all these reports, and we called these press conferences, and something amazing happened. It turned out that the jail they were going to build was going to be built in a white community. and nobody had told the white folks. So we were happy too. And we discovered a concept called United Front. Now, we were there because we loved the kids. They were there because they were kind of scared of the kids. But we won. Unlikely allies got together and stopped it. And to this day, there is a juvenile hall in Alameda County, but it's not the far side of Alameda County in the white part of the county. It's right where it was, and it's the same size that it was, and smaller in terms of population than it was, because we fought that battle and we were willing to stretch our arms out and work with people we didn't know how to work with and accept the differences in the viewpoint of the grown people to advance the interests of the young people. That was a super jail fight. Well, fast forward 15 years. 14, but who's counting? That fight, which Annie E. Casey Foundation was the principal supporter of, both in terms of the funding, but also in terms of the strategy, in terms of the research, the policy. That fight multiplied by many, many, many other fights. We're no longer on a growth curve for putting kids in cages. We stabilized them. Now we're starting to come down. When they first started in these rooms talking about a 50% reduction, while we were still on the upswing, people thought they were nuts, thought you were nuts. But now here we are. That number, 50% reduction, is now within view. This initiative itself touches the lives in some ways of 2/3 of the young people in the country, either directly or indirectly. Help is on the way, and it's coming from folks like us, but how do you turn the potential into reality? Let me tell you a little bit about my own story, and then let me tell you where I think we can go with this thing. I'm going to be very honest with you guys because we're all friends here. I burned out. I couldn't take it. Most of the people in this room, whether you're talking about James Bell or any of my other heroes, you guys are stronger than I am and better people. I felt like I was putting my face up against a furnace every day, trying to do frontline grassroots work. I got tired of going to funerals. I got tired of going to funerals in Oakland where the young people were in the caskets and the old people were sitting up in the pews. I got tired of seeing young people in Oakland who had more ritual and more comfort level at a funeral than at a graduation. Didn't know what the hell to do at a graduation, had all kind of ritual for funerals. They went to them every month, if not every other weekend. I got tired of that. I got tired of going into courtrooms and knowing we were right and losing. And I burned out. And it wasn't some genius brainstorm for me to go work on green jobs. I had no choice. I was shot. And it was myself trying to get healthy again, just trying to restore myself spiritually, trying to restore myself even physically. I started going to Marin County, right across the bridge. And I discovered in Marin County stuff that we didn't have in Oakland, like salads. Yoga, solar panels, all kind of stuff. And I started healing and feeling better. But I'm having to drive back and forth across that bridge. You guys been in Northern California. And so I asked myself the question, why do I have to drive, why do I have to leave Oakland to go to Marin County to get some healthy food and some clean air and some meditation and see some hybrid cars, and why can't we have that stuff in Oakland? And I said, these kids need green jobs, not jails. If we're going to solarize California, give these kids jobs doing it. If we're going to have organic food all over California, give these kids jobs growing it and selling it. And we put together a little program called the Green Jobs Corps in Oakland to try to take some of our kids who had been in and out of the system and teach them how to put up solar panels. This is a little project. Wasn't that big a deal. But a woman named Nancy Pelosi happened to hear about it. She came and checked it out. She happened to be Speaker of the House at that time. She took me by the hand to Washington, D.C. She had me testify in front of almost every committee that she had at that time, talking about that program. And we convinced a guy named George W. Bush to sign into law something called the Green Jobs Act. And the Green Jobs Act put federal money on the table to spread that program all across the country. I wrote a book about it the next year, 2008, called The Green Collar Economy. The book became a bestseller. It's at 100 U.S. universities right now, 6 languages all around the world. A guy named Barack Obama read the book. He asked me to help out on the transition team. I did a good enough job. He brought me to Washington, D.C. And I went from scrapping and scraping, trying to get a couple of $1,000 to get that Green Jobs Corps started, to advising the president on how to spend $80 billion. Best 6 months of my life, followed by the worst 2 weeks. Fox News discovered my left-wing radical Bay Area berserkly past. And I'm not going to go into this, but I will leave you with this observation before I move on. You may have an uncle or a cousin or an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend who watches that. And they may go on Facebook and they may tell you all about what they're watching. I just want you to gently remind them that anytime your main news source is named after a sneaky predatory mammal, that can't be trusted to guard the hen house or anything else, you might want to diversify your news sources. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So, that was tough. That was tough. I went into a real depression for about a year. Wasn't sure if I'd ever get out of it. We've all been there. This is tough work that we do. We never talk about the human side of it. It's tough. At a certain point, started feeling like I just can't keep sitting this thing out. And I started trying to find other ways to make a contribution. But the good part about having gone from being a grassroots outsider to being a White House insider to being a grassroots outsider again is that I had a 360 perspective that I didn't have before. Paid for it, tough cost. But what I realized was that sometimes people will make assumptions about who is where on what issue or whatever, and when we were in the White House, we had to actually do things called investigate, right? I mean, you're trying to count votes, you actually have to call people, you have to talk to people, you have to call chiefs of staff. It turns out sometimes somebody you thought was here is there, somebody you thought was there is here. And between that and the super jail fight, I realized, maybe we want to do something for these kids. Maybe we might have some allies in some places that might surprise us. Turns out we do. I want to talk about 2 sources of potential support for this movement that have been underexplored, I think, certainly by the progressive side of this movement. Everybody here is not a progressive, but a lot of people are, at least somebody you may have met here is one. And why I think we can actually go beyond just reducing incarceration. We can start expanding opportunity for these young folks. Number 1, I get a chance to work with Newt Gingrich every day, and the guy is a genius. Newt is so smart that when I'm arguing with him, he'll sometimes stop me and say, the arguments that you're using against me are not sharp enough. If I were you, I would be saying this and this. It's like when I'm playing Candyland with my kids, you know? They like reshuffle the deck so they can win. That's how it is arguing with Newt. It's not even fair. And we don't agree on anything. Love the guy. Agree on nothing except this. And I was so shocked to discover that Newt has almost the same evaluation of the 1990s that we do. Newt Gingrich says we overshot the runway on incarceration. Newt Gingrich feels that there was an overreaction, and Newt Gingrich feels that there was a violation of conservative principles in the rush to build up this massive government bureaucracy with no accountability that produces worse and worse results and continues to grow because it's producing worse results. That's not the welfare system, that's the prison system if it's anything. And it turns out, folks, that there's something happening on the right. There are 3 trends developing on the right that we need to pay close attention to. Number 1, red state governors, fiscal conservatives, are in a big, big quandary because they have to spend so much money on prisons that don't work. The question they have to ask themselves is, do I raise taxes or do I close prisons? Now, for you, this is a very easy question. But for some people, it's tough. Taxes or them? Who do I hate more, taxes? But a lot of governors are coming to the conclusion they don't want to raise taxes, so they're going to have to be inventive and creative and smarter on the prison side. Fiscal conservatives. Number 2, the libertarians. The libertarians in general don't like excessive government authority. They have not traditionally focused so much on the criminal justice system, but the Tea Party created a committee in Congress, in the House, the House Committee on Over-Criminalization. We say over-incarceration. They say over-criminalization. From their point of view, the government puts so many different rules and regulations on the books and laws on the books, people don't know they're violating the law, they get in trouble. And I do think that some libertarians may be concerned as they look at the complexion of government changing. There may be some concern that you give the true American majority a whole lot of power to put people in jail. Suddenly they think they might be at risk. Their sympathies are beginning to change. So the libertarians, you listen to Rand Paul talk about the drug war, you close your eyes, it could be anybody in this room. Number 3, and this is the key part. You got the red state fiscal conservative governors, they don't want to raise taxes. They'd rather be smart than dumb with the money. You got the libertarians, they don't want to see excessive criminalization or incarceration and are getting more and more vocal. But number 3, you've got the evangelicals. And the evangelicals believe in redemption. And they're getting louder about this. They're getting more passionate about this. That young men, in particular, they have a bias in the direction of the male part of this equation, but let's just take them at their word. The young men, when they're young men, do dumb stuff. George W. Bush said, when I was young and stupid, I was young and stupid. And there's some evangelicals who now are willing to apply that to all kids and not just their own. That is major, major change, folks, potentially, in terms of being able to build a united front. If fiscal conservatives and libertarians and evangelicals can be brought forward, along with all the smart, good, pragmatic folks and progressives in this room and others, It can become politically safe, in fact, politically smart, even in 2016, to be on the side of ending the era of mass incarceration. You just saw New York Times come out for it. Newt Gingrich and I had a big piece out last week about it. It's becoming common sense. So if that is true, if in fact it is true that we can begin to close the prison doors, how do you then open the doors of opportunity for young people so that shrinking the population of people who are confined doesn't become a disaster, which everybody's afraid of? Now, people in this room know the confinement is what's causing the disaster, but you got to be able to say to America, we're going to close the prison doors, we're also going to open the doors of opportunity. How do you do that? And let's just be honest now. The economy is not healthy. You got people with PhDs that don't have jobs. You got people who are job ready right now, worked in factories, worked in manufacturing for 20 years, 30 years, they can't find jobs. You got kids walking off. Some of you guys are paying for these kids walking off these college campuses. And they're walking off a cliff into the worst job market in the history of the country since the Great Depression. We can't have a whole bunch of happy talk and foolish talk about how easy it's going to be to get kids who are in trouble employed. And the green economy we thought was going to be a huge solution. Unfortunately, Congress didn't do its job, and so the green economy is growing, but not fast enough to even absorb skilled workers, let alone all the kids I was talking about. So let's be honest, what the heck are we going to do? There's a solution. Not perfect, but important. In the normal part of this economy, folks, for every one job that's open, there are 3 people looking for a job. For every one job that's open, there are 3 people looking for a job. That's horrible musical chairs, and you know who's going to be left standing. There's one part of the economy where it's the reverse, where for every 3 jobs, there's only 1 qualified American. It's the tech sector. It's the tech sector, Silicon Valley. And you say, what does that have to do with these dadgum kids? Funny you should ask. You know what it takes to code a computer? Math. Math. You say, yes, but our kids suck at math. Au contraire. 3 o'clock in the morning on the streets of Oakland, if you can lean into a car window and do that math in metrics, and never be off by a milligram, never lose a dime, no calculator, no algebra class, looking both ways for the cops. If you can do that math under those conditions, you can code a computer. I'm sorry. We got to stop wasting genius. We got to stop wasting mathematical genius in urban America. Now, you say to yourself, Van, it was bad enough when you're talking about the solar panels and the yogurt for the kids. Now you really lost it. I'll tell you one last story, and then I'll let you go. And Bart knows I'm just honest. I told you, you can come up here, I'm going to just say it the real way, man. So don't get mad at me. I did not realize how racist I was against black boys until we started working on this Yes We Code project to turn 100,000 low opportunity kids into the best computer coders in the world. We're doing 2 things in my shop. We're doing this thing called Cut 50. Me and Newt, big bipartisan initiative to try to make it safe for everybody, talk about cutting the prison population in half. We're going to launch that next year, close the prison doors. The other thing is open doors of opportunity. and we partnered with Facebook and Ford Foundation and Prince the rock star to launch this big initiative called Yes We Code. Not Yes We Can, Yes We Code. Got to get 100,000 low-opportunity kids trained, be the best computer coach in the world. And I'm going around, I'm giving this speech, I'm passionate, and then we did our first hackathon in Oakland. And I go there, and it's all these folks from Oakland, and 70 African-American boys and young men in there gonna come up with new apps, come up with new computer programs, work with these guys from Google. It's gonna be this whole thing. And you know, the first thought in my mind when I walked in there and I looked at these kids, I hope there's not a fight. I said, I hope there's not a fight. Because if there's a fight, we're going to be in the news. We'll never get Google back in. That's me. It's not some Ku Klux Klan guy. That's me. George W. Bush calls that the soft bigotry of low expectations. These kids were unbelievable. They were unreal. Beautiful, bright, funny. The people from Google were blown away by these kids, by their ideas. I mean, it was heartbreaking the stuff they were coming up with, but it was genius. One of the things they came up with, they built an app that could notify them about their court dates. Genius! I said, we don't get in trouble when we get stopped by the cops. That's not the problem. I mean, it happens. We know the kids in the suburbs, they don't get stopped by the cops, but we're out here and we're over police. We get that. We get stopped. That's not the problem. The problem is, then they give us a piece of paper that says be in this building at this time, 3.5 weeks from now at 3:15 on the, and we forget. And then we get in trouble. Can we have an app for that? And they built it. There was a grandmother there whose nephew had been shot on a playground. Broad daylight in front of about 60 people, all of whom had cell phones. Nobody called 911. Why? Nobody wanted to be called a snitch. Who said that? Nobody wanted to be called a snitch. And the kid bled to death. So she took the lead and built an app, which is now in the iTunes store, called Got 'em, where you can just take a picture of what's going on and send it to the police anonymously. And you could scroll down through it, rape, murder, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's horrible, but it's genius. So the last thing I just want to say to you is that we got to stop wasting genius. We got to stop wasting genius in this country. And the most important genius that we've got to stop wasting is our own. Is our own. There's enough wisdom and smarts and experience and good ideas in this room alone, in this changing environment, to connect with the right wing, Silicon Valley, and others to start fixing this problem. When I talk to the people at Facebook and Apple and other places, I say, listen, you got markets you don't even know exist. You got solutions out there you don't know exist because you got problems out there you never heard of. If we start giving this next generation the tools and the technology and the training to build a future that works for them, it won't just work for them. It'll work for all of us. Let's stop wasting genius. Thank you very much.
We have some time for some questions if folks want to take advantage of Van's presence. The mics are up here, or you can shout loudly, or maybe you've invented an app that will amplify your voice. Questions or comments? Sir?
Can you just tell us more about what you and Newt have planned for the future on that question?
Sure.
How it fits into right on crime and the other conservative.
For folks in the back, the question was whether or not Van would describe in more detail what he and Newt Gingrich are working on.
Very good. And that was my good friend, Will Harrell. Good to see you, brother. Obviously, there's Right on Crime, which Newt has been a part of for a very long time. Very important center of gravity, and the conservative conversation has really been centered there. It's growing, and Newt loves that part. What we're doing is this thing called Cut 50. And the idea is, Newt's a genius, and he says, look, you can't just wander around talking about this stuff. You got to be able to advance some serious goals that force people to rethink stuff. So we want to we actually want to talk with you guys about how to do this the right way. Right now, it's a conversation. We announced it last week. But a couple of ideas that have come up. First of all, there might be some market-friendly solutions that just haven't been talked about or thought about before, and we want to create some space for that. For instance, just crazy ideas Newt and I have. If you're a warden, let's just imagine you had a system like this. If you're a warden and you have 10 people who you send home and none of them come back, you just saved the state or the city or the county a bunch of money. Shouldn't you get a piece of the savings? Like, again, conservative principles. Shouldn't you align the financial incentives? If somebody who's in charge of somebody actually has a financial incentive for that person to do well, i.e., if you get out of here and you stay gone for 3 years, I'm going to get a bonus, that person might get very creative suddenly about how to make sure the person doesn't come back. They might think about job training programs differently. They might think about outreach to employers differently. They might think about mental health differently. They might think about art and music differently. They might think about any number. And if you imagine this, what if you had a system where you had a community safety super fund where everybody gets to compete for the dollars for community safety? For instance, I never understood this in the first place. In California, I don't know what the numbers are now, but it used to be $160,000 per year per kid locked up. $160,000 per year per kid locked up. You give one grandmama in Oakland one kid and $160,000, that kid is never getting in trouble again, right? I mean, period. I mean, give me the kid and the money. I say, okay, kid, let's talk about this. In Europe, I'll drive you to the airport in a Prius that you can have. When we get to Europe, here's my conversation. Just don't do anything stupid. At the end of the year, I'll give you the remaining 100K. Done. Right? I mean, you can't possibly mess up $160,000 per year per kid unless you never had any intention of helping the kid in the first place. Okay? So we're trying to make a safe space, Newt and I, where people can put very crazy ideas on the table. Maybe they don't go anywhere, but it seems that it's time now to make it safe to talk about really, really fundamental innovations that might actually better advantage and much more radically advantage people who've got better solutions at a lower cost. Will? Yeah.
This is a big problem we're seeing in places like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, is we got conservatives, ideologues like you coming along. You've got business leaders coming along. You've got religious leaders coming along. But you've got sheriffs, DAs, and a whole industry, not so much.
Yeah.
Because particularly in like Louisiana, locally,
Hey, we'll grab the mic, man. I love that big, beautiful voice, but I don't know if they can hear it behind you.
I was just saying I'm not sure if this is on.
It's on.
Okay. We in Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama, where there's a serious adult, and there's been a lot of reforms on juvenile incarceration, but there's significant problems with adult rates of incarceration. Even in those states, like Newt and other ideologues are getting on board. You've got business leaders getting on board. Rick Perry in Texas and the Texas Public Policy Foundation, the right-wing think tanks on board, evangelical communities, like you said, on board, but a major political force in states like Louisiana and others are not on board, and that's Sheriff's Association, District Attorney's Association, because you're talking about their industry.
Absolutely.
And the example you just said makes sense to me. Give that grandmother $160, and that kid will be better well kept. But you're taking that $160 away from somebody else who's depending on it and jobs. And so what I'm hoping that you and y'all can begin to think about is a market solution to that. Whenever you talk about closing, the one success of JDI has been the closure of a number of facilities.
Gotcha. Well, look, I think the shortest way to say this is we spent 20 years building up an incarceration industry. We now need to build up a de-incarceration industry, okay? We need to find a way for people to make money getting people out of prison and home safe and home productive. And if there's dollars on the table to do stuff the dumb way, we need to start putting dollars on the table to do stuff the smart way. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be a fight. But we're in one of those moments where truth is on our side. The country can't afford to waste this much money on stupid stuff anymore. And you're beginning to see the potential for a united front. The problem we've had up until now is that all of the market-driven solutions have been terrible. There's been private for-profit prisons that just want to profit on putting more people behind bars. At a less cost, which means even fewer services for people. And then they want to bake in the number of people who are going to be locked up no matter what the crime rate is. That's using market-based solutions in the worst possible way. But there are smarter market-based solutions that actually align financial incentives, that actually introduce competition to drive us toward the outcomes that we want. And that's a conversation I think both progressives and conservatives can have together. And I want to see a competition between the political parties to come up with more and more smart on-crime solutions. So what Newt and I are going to do, we're talking about doing a convening. We're going to need your help. We're not going to just go off on our own. We want to work with people. But if we can use the fact that Newt and I are on TV together arguing all the time, say we've got this crossfire on TV, but we've got a ceasefire on this issue. We think we can create a little bit of space heading into 2016.
Great. One more question.
Yes, you did address my question about the privatization of prisons and for-profit incarceration and whole towns being employed on this. So now I have another question, and that is, how can we be prepared for there's an aging workforce, and there's really going to be a shortage, so I have heard, of workers and a lot of jobs available. So how can we really be prepared to take advantage of that with the population that we're working with?
That's a really good question. I'm going to cheat and let you ask one, and then I'll answer them both. So go ahead.
My question, as a youth who's been in the system, is whether or not you have anybody on your team that's actually helping you, that's actually system involved, or was system involved at one point, particularly youth. That's my biggest thing. I don't know if you have any ideas or whether or not you've been working with youth.
Do you got a job?
I actually do. I work for the Beer Institute of Justice right now.
Well, we haven't sorted out the hiring. You know, I used to be a part of something called the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, which I was happy to get started almost 20 years ago, and that's where the Books Not Bars campaign is. And I tend to work with them, and they do have system-involved people, especially parents of kids who are in the system. But I would love to get your help and counsel. I mean, the great thing about where I am at this point in my life, you know, 'cause I was born in '68, the year they killed Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy. You know, they tried to wipe out hope in the country. And I got a chance to grow up in that kind of 40 years in the wilderness between '68 and 2008 when we elected Obama. And I know what it's like when the country has very little hope, very little direction. I saw that one shining moment where we got it back, and I've seen what's happened since. And what I know is there's not any easy answers. There's not going to be any one superhero or one super initiative that fixes all of it. But what we can do is build up, you know, nested networks of problem solvers that can cooperate with each other and help each other, and you know, every color under the rainbow and all genders and races and sexual orientations, whatever. Like, there's enough wisdom in the country to get the thing solved. And because it's a brand new initiative that we're going to be rolling out in 2015, I'd love to have your involvement, and you know, anybody else that you think we should work with, let me know. And then with regard to, both of you guys are talking about age for different issues. With regard to the aging workforce, I don't have any good answers to that. What I do know is this. I think we're going to have to be a lot more heads up about the onrushing future. You've got smart screens and apps and robots that are going to be wiping out about 1 billion jobs on the planet over the next 10 years. Nobody's calculating what that's going to mean for community safety, community opportunity, the next generation. I mean, you're going to drive up to a McDonald's, and it'll just be a flat screen. You'll hit some buttons. A window will open. A mechanical arm will give you your Big Mac, and there will not be a human being in the building. That's where things are headed. You've got Jeff Bezos. I'm spending a lot of time in Silicon Valley now. You got Jeff Bezos saying they don't want to have truck drivers. They're going to have driverless cars and drones delivering everything, right? You've probably talked to him. So what does that mean if even service sector jobs are going to be impacted by information technology? One of the reasons I'm so passionate about getting kids involved is I'm like, listen, if the robots are coming, I want you designing the robots and telling them what to do than having the robots taking your job and telling you what to do. There's a future that's coming out there that in some ways, this is scary, but it's also interesting. Nobody's prepared for it, which means the communities we care about are not prepared, nor are others. So against the onrushing future, there's some equality here. There's some equality. And maybe we can use the fact that so much change is coming so quickly, we may as well hit reset and really think about what we want to do with these young people. And some of the young people who are coming out of the system, they've never coded a computer, but hell, some of the kids in suburbs never coded one either. And there's a real opportunity here, I think, for us to come up with innovative solutions, new partnerships. Let's not assume that just because you got a bunch of rich folks in Silicon Valley, they don't care about these issues. Let's not assume just because somebody's got an R behind their name that they don't care, or somebody's got a D behind their name, they've got the right answer. We're going to need each other to figure it out. So that's what we're here for. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you.
Van Jones, everybody. You're free to start wandering to workshops.